everybody.
How are y'all doing? Good. Well, welcome to our final session for our nutrition series, Eat Well, Be Well. Today, Megan is going to present on mindful eating. And on behalf of Wellness Works, myself, Courtney Martin, and Christina Bookout, we just want to thank you all for tuning in over the past 6 weeks. We hope that this information has been informative and helpful to each of you, whether you've been able to attend in person or if you've been live streaming it or watching those recording sessions. We really just hope that you found this beneficial for your day-to-day life. And if it's something that you can refer to, we will keep these live streamed or recorded videos up on our YouTube channels. And if you guys ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Wellness Works, and we can get that information from Megan and get you whatever you need. So, but Megan, if you come up here, we actually have a thank you for you. We put together a nice little wellness goodie bag for you. So this is yours, and just thank you for everything that you've done for us for the past 6 weeks, and we hope to have you back. All right, appreciate it. Of course, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, howdy, and thank you all for letting me come wrap up this series of nutrition. We're really going to focus on the mindful eating part of this today. For those of you who haven't tuned in, or for those of you who haven't been here before, my name is Megan Wyndham. I'm a registered and licensed dietitian, and I work on campus with students in the health center, the Butyl Health Center. So I see students regularly for any type of nutrition need. But this is one topic that's kind of, we don't talk about it a whole lot. But I was telling a client the other day, I said, you know, we think about food so much as to nutrients, fiber, protein, carbs, fat, what we're eating, but we don't always think about how we're eating. And this is a great segue even into the holiday season as we're thinking about how much we're eating or how little we're eating or who we're with. So hopefully after the end of this whole series or presentation, if this is the first one to join in on or if you've done others, you'll get a little bit out of why we eat what we eat, and maybe you'll even pick up on some of those things that you're doing and haven't even realized. So please stop me at any point if you have questions, if there's something that you're doing or want to change with your eating patterns or have some thoughts with, please feel free to ask at any point. So we think about, we talked a little bit in some of our previous discussions about fad diets and just dieting in general. But I would challenge you to think of mindful eating a little bit more about, here again, why we eat what we do and what influences that. So deprivation diets are one thing we think about, but they really don't work for these 3 reasons. And if for any of you who ever have been on a diet or a family member or friend has been on a diet, when we look at this, we see our body fights them, our brains fight them. We tend to crave those foods later on or at a certain point. And our environment fights them, and our environment is what we're really going to focus a little bit more on today, because it's our brain chemicals that tell us what to eat and when to eat. But if you notice about who you're with and who you're eating with or around or family members or friends, we notice that we eat a little bit differently when we're with a group of friends who's maybe always trying to eat healthy. Or we eat differently when we're with a spouse who really doesn't care what they eat and we eat more. So those are some things to think about here. But our body is programmed to really stay alive, and so this is what our metabolism does, and we have to feed it appropriately and know what we're putting in and why we're putting it in. So our metabolism, each one of us have those. Some are fast, some are small, and it depends on our age, it depends on our weight, a lot of it depends on genetics, and it also depends on our body composition. So how much lean mass we have, how much fat mass we have determines how much or how fast our metabolism is. So when the body has plenty of food to burn, it turns up the metabolism and it keeps burning. So when we put more in, we burn. When our body is restricted, it turns metabolism speed down and it burns slowly. So I can't tell you how many times I tell this to students, under-eating is just as harmful as overeating. So we've got to find a little bit of that balance, and that's what this mindful eating is going to teach us a little bit with today. So how do you lose weight without slowing your metabolism? If I said under-eating is just as harmful as overeating, how do I know how much to eat and what's appropriate? If you want to go back to the past presentation, we talked about calculating calorie needs and how much would be appropriate. I know those slides were sent out, but I'm happy to share those again too. We won't dive completely into that today, but we talked a little bit about that. What we have to do is we have to eat intuitively. And I tell this to students a lot too. I want you to develop a healthy relationship with food. It's not about a diet. It's not about counting everything. It's not really about, being so strict with our portions and what we're doing. Yes, all that's important, but we've got to eat intuitively. So we've got to get the stomach connected with the brain. Because if you notice, a lot of times our brain makes those decisions before we even have a chance to tell our body we're hungry or we're full or we truly want that. So if we think about this, we've got to make healthy choices, eat intuitively, and we're gonna talk about that with mindful eating. Because humans can lose a half a pound of weight a week while maintaining a very normal metabolism. We don't have to cut to 1,000 calories a day. We don't have to go exercise or run 4 or 5 miles a day if we're not used to doing that. But we can slowly do that and slowly make changes from here. And we're really going to focus more on the mind today versus just the actual food component. Okay? So our brain. On average, we make over 200 decisions a day. What we eat, what we wear, when we come to work, when we leave. So many things. And so many of you who maybe even have families, you make decisions for your children or you make decisions for others in your family. So the first thing most deprivation diets call for is the removal of our favorite foods. Low carb, low sugar, those types of things. And if we think about that, our brain is impacted, maybe not short term, but long term we start to see some impacts. So here I would like to challenge you to think about, can you rely on that willpower to say no to those things 200 times a day? It takes a lot to say no to that. And a diet is not about how much willpower we have or not. It's really about developing, here again, a healthy relationship with food. And how can we meet in the middle and not be on one extreme or the other? 400 times a day for 2 days. Over 4,000 for 1 week. What about 6,000 times for just a month? So we've got to think about this a little bit in terms of this question. So when we look at this, which dot looks bigger to you, the one on the right or the one on the left? The right? And why do you think it looks bigger?
I guess because it's surrounded by smaller dots.
Mm-hmm. Anyone think differently?
One on the left looks big. Are you talking about the outside?
The middle dot, the middle.
Oh,
the
middle.
Same?
Same.
Because it's a trick question, so it must be down.
Yeah, it can be a great question. When we look at that, I'll go back here again. When we think about this, they are the same, but one looks a little bit bigger based on its surroundings. And you're exactly right. You mentioned the one on the right looks a little bigger. Now let's flip this to portion sizes. Which one looks bigger here?
Right.
The right. And why?
Right
A
there.
different size plate, yes. So this plate on the right is a little bit different than this one on the left. And so we are impacted by not only what we're choosing, but the environment here, what those surroundings and what that looks like. So think about that as we challenge ourselves here. So our environment, what are some things you feel like impact what you eat environmentally? Convenience, yes. Location of maybe where you are and where you got to go next. Schedule, yes. What else?
Who you're eating with.
Who you're eating with, absolutely. Makes a huge difference on what we're eating or not eating, or if they influence us to eat another appetizer or order one or whatnot there too. What else?
Cost.
Cost, yes. Environment plays a big part in that. And what our resources are and where we're going to go. So when we look at this, with the amount of fast food locations on every corner, it's amazing how our society has grown in that. We went from periods or stretches, if you drive or take a road trip, to nothing, to something almost every at least 30 miles or so. So they're very frequent. Updated apps on the Domino's delivery. We see curbside. We see apps everywhere for delivery. I even had a patient yesterday who was having all meals delivered to her location. So it's just something that convenience and not getting out or having to go do anything. Go look at restaurants. When we go to a restaurant, or I think of Olive Garden as a top one for a lot of the students that I work with, the portions are large, the plates are large. Mexican food restaurants, they're large plates, big portions. We see that, and I'm going to show you a video to emphasize this. We buy in bulk. We go to Costco, we go to Sam's. There's a lot of information here. Everyone is overscheduled all the time. You kind of mentioned that. Convenience, where we're going, who we're with. Missed meals. Then by the time we get to that meal at later at night, we're starving, so we'll drive through wherever and get whatever because we don't have time to go eat that at home. Now we're distracted because we're hurrying up to eat before we have to go do the next thing. And then we're eating so quickly that we never even realize if we're full or hungry or what that might be. So these are all very big environmental factors that influence what we're doing. So this is just kind of a cute little graphic here to introduce the types of dieters or the types of eating patterns. And as we go through each of these, I just want you to challenge yourself to think about where you fit in as we go through each one of them. Because as I was going through this, I found, okay, I'm kind of there. Oh, this is a little bit of me as well. And so it kind of puts things into perspective of where you are and how we can make some changes with that. So we're going to go through each one of these on the next slides, but we have the careful eater, the professional dieter, the unconscious eater, the chaotic unconscious eater, the refuse not unconscious eater, the waste not unconscious eater, and those are the 6 that we're going to talk through each year. Okay? So as I explain each one, give me your feedback. Talk a little bit about what you think, why you think you may be that, or how that fits your personality or eating style. So the careful eater. So this is one that's very health conscious, has good intentions. So we start off well, doing well. May anguish over every and each food they're consuming. They spend a lot of the day thinking about what their next meal will be, planning things out. A little bit of that overly careful eater. May undereat during the day, but overeat later at night because they're trying to be so good during the day and start off well and eat well around coworkers, but then the nighttime comes and I'm just so hungry, I'm going to keep eating. And then sometimes guided by the appropriate time of day. So no eating after 8 p.m. I get that a lot with patients. I'm only going to eat this at noon or this certain amount, or I'm not going to go to the candy bowl today. So we have this kind of careful thinking about food often mentality. The problem, though, this can lead to not a healthy relationship, but a negative relationship with our food, as well as impact our social and personal life. If we can't eat after 6 and someone invites us to come at 8, we're going to say no, what are we going to do? And we kind of start to develop these little food rules and carefulness. So this is one type of eater that we have. The professional dieter. So this is one that's tried every diet in the book, weight loss tricks, many different diets. We can talk about the slew of diets we've been on. I kind of call this the Last Supper binge. So they'll say, well, I'm going to eat all this chocolate now and then and I'm going to give it up for Lent. I'm going to give it up for the holidays, whatever that might be. But then that usually leads to a binge later on. They restrict their diet, lose weight, gain weight, binge, restrict. It's kind of this yo-yo type eating pattern. And then we're just more frustrated in the end. The problem with this is that, here again, chronic undereating. So undereating is just as harmful as overeating, can lead to overeating periods of binges or overeating at times, and can develop an eating disorder or disordered eating patterns. Okay? So diets are one thing. Using them over and over and over can be another harmful piece here. The unconscious eater, so this is kind of, I look at this picture and think, oh my gosh, that would be something that I'd probably do at home, because you just go from one thing to the next and this piece is open and then we're here, and it just gets crazy. So chaotic unconscious, overscheduled, usually forgets to eat or overly busy and just kind of goes about their day. Individuals will be starving and then overeat when they do have time for food. And under this one too is the refuse not unconscious eater. So well, this is just one of those that if the candy bowl is sitting out, they'll just grab it every time. If it's out or available, free cookies in the lobby, free popcorn, we're just going to go get it because it's available and it's there. They may not even realize how much they're eating or when they're even eating. And we see that, I see this a lot in just our society right now. It's just kind of, we're busy, on the go, it's free food, I don't know when I'm going to eat again, so I'm just going to grab this. I see this a lot in the generation of parents in particular that have younger kids or kids on the go. We see this often as well. And under this unconscious, so we had chaotic, refuse not, and now waste not. This is one, they value the food dollar. So we talked about cost and budget. So this is one who wouldn't want to throw anything away, and they're just eating it because they don't want to throw that away. They want to get as much as they can for their money, so we may be going to more buffet style, we may be going to more of the location that we can get a big bang for our buck, not necessarily getting quality food. So the problem, all of these unconscious eating patterns usually leads to overeating. So we tend to just eat because we're tired, eat because we're busy, eat because food's available, eat because it's free or it's a cheaper value. So we tend to overeat in this pattern too. And with these, I can see myself here a lot of just kind of that mindless eating pattern. Okay? So these are some great studies. If you ever look into some of Brian Wainsick's studies, they're not researchy as far as if you're not a researcher and it's going through like all these different values and these graphs and charts. His are very easy to understand, and they're great because they give real life examples. So one of the examples that he did, he wrote a mindless eating book, but he has a whole lab, or used to have a whole lab in Cornell that he does with students on research around why we eat what we eat. But what he did was he handed out free popcorn to each individual attending a Saturday matinee afternoon movie. Some received a medium-sized popcorn bucket, others received a large bucket. Okay, so what he was trying to measure was how much are we going to eat based on our bucket size. And what we found is that the popcorn they were given was old popcorn, 5-day-old popcorn. They were all given it though, same small or large. One described it as tasting like the styrofoam packing peanuts. So it wasn't fresh, this wasn't like great movie theater quality popcorn. And what they found was the ones who received the larger container ate 53% more popcorn. Now, they didn't know who got what. They didn't sit there and compare, you got a small, I got a large, I'm going to eat more because it's large. But when we have a larger amount, we tend to eat more from that. And despite it being 5-day-old popcorn. So this would equal to 21 dips in the bucket. They were certainly distracted. So we can tell this one, maybe that unconscious, busy, on the go. The popcorn was there, so after a few more moments, they would forget how poorly it tasted, dip their hand in the bucket, and continue to eat. He's also done studies with, say, for example, chicken wings. So you go to a restaurant, you get, maybe it's endless chicken wings at a restaurant. And what they did was they said, okay, your participants, when you're finished with eating the chicken wing, leave the bone on the platter in the middle. One table, the waiter pulled the platter out continuously of the empty bones. The other, they left it there. And what they found was the waiter who pulled the empty platter out continuously, they ate a whole lot more of the chicken wings because they didn't see how many they truly ate. It was just a continual, I just keep eating because it's here and available, not because I've eaten 20 sitting in front of me. So it's really environmental of why we're eating what we're eating, especially with container sizes and our environment, distraction and how much, okay? And remember, it was 5-day-old popcorn. Let me show you this video here, because I think this is a great example of portion sizes.
Series this morning with a look at ourselves. To put it quite simply, our nation of overeaters. But the good news is there's some simple things that all of us can do about it, and early show consumer correspondence is on Hookman has details. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Hannah.
Let me try to keep it all the way up. Is that what you want? Oh, there you go.
We continue our special series this morning with a look at ourselves. To put it quite simply, we are a nation of overeaters. But the good news is there's some simple things that all of us can do about it, and early show consumer correspondent Susan Hookman has details. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Hannah. Believe it or not, you can eat fast food, chocolate, candy, and cookies and still shed pounds. You are about to meet a professor who says it all comes down to something very simple: portion control. People are pride. We think they're the enemy in the battle of the bulge, but maybe not. You have to eat all those things to lose weight. A nutrition expert, Jim Painter, says it's not so much what you eat, but how much you eat. He proves it in his documentary, Portion Size Mate, where he puts 2 of his students on a 30-day fast food diet.
They both ended up losing a couple of pounds. Their blood cholesterol levels dropped. Their blood lipids stayed normal. Their liver enzymes stayed normal. Everything was fine if they ate the right portion.
And this was eating fast food every day.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they ended up losing weight.
But getting the right portion size is getting harder. Painter showed us how portions have ballooned. This is a Caesar salad from 20 years ago versus today. Double the portion, double the calories. And same with the pasta and the meatballs.
Same with the pasta and meatballs. Now, if you just say, give me the regular serving, it's going to be almost twice as much.
And just look at a regular burger and fries from the 50s compared to now. But don't you think people want this? They don't want that.
They really do. And so one of the problems is that we have this idea that more is better. And if you look at people's waistlines, they are more now. It's not better.
But is it possible to eat smaller portions and still be satisfied? Painter says yes. And to prove his point, he helped us set up an experiment. We invited this group of people to take part in an all-you-can-eat ice cream taste test.
Take as much as you want. If you want to come back for seconds, you can come back for seconds.
We started by splitting them into two separate groups. Group A was given a big scoop, big bowls, and big spoons. Group B was given a scoop, bowls, and spoons about half the size. As a result, Group A took huge portions and piled on the toppings. Once we weighed each bowl, they chowed down. Everyone in this group ate quickly. Most even came back for seconds. But watch what happened when we brought in Group B, the ones with the smaller bowls. They filled their dishes, but with smaller spoons, it took them more time to get to the bottom, and most quit after only one serving. Does everybody feel like they ate enough ice cream? Yes. Then we revealed the truth of our experiment and the results. Even though both groups told us they were completely satisfied, Group A, the one with the bigger bowls and spoons, ate twice as much as Group B. Are you surprised that you guys ate double what they ate?
Absolutely, and I can definitely see how just the size of the bowls did it.
Why do you think your group ate less?
I guess because when you see that your bowl's full and then you eat everything in there, you feel that you had enough and that's all you need.
Jim Painter says the lesson is simple. Control your weight by controlling your portion size. What is the appropriate size?
I don't think you need to make a big calculation. And I tell people, listen, I'm really serious with this. Reach down and grab your side. If there's more there between your thumb and your index finger than you want, think small and choose small.
I have that problem. Hey,
All right, so tell me what you thought about that. Anyone find themselves there? Often, right? We talked about restaurants, we talked about when we're eating out the larger amounts. How many of you have ever tried to use smaller plates at home or smaller bowls? Has it worked? Sometimes, yeah, we see it as being fuller. We eat a little bit less. Sometimes we go back for seconds because we know we're eating smaller amounts. But smaller cups, smaller plates, smaller bowls have really been one of the most effective ways to limit our portion sizes. So if you're trying to think, well, what can I start doing right now? What would be effective? Just use a smaller salad plate instead of a dinner plate. Use a smaller bowl instead of a larger bowl. Because here again, it's our mind that sees that plate as a start and finish. It's kind of like a bag of chips. If we think about a large grab bag of chips, it's a start and finish for our mind. And if you grew up kind of like I did, you finished your plate and you ate everything, you don't want to waste, so our mind says finish it. Whereas the individual bags of chips or the smaller bowl or smaller serving, we see that as a start and finish. And if we really step back, we're going to be just as satisfied if we ate the large bag or the small bag, but we're going to be able to manage our weight a whole lot better and feel better about our choices with that individual. So for those of you who don't want to buy the individual servings of the chips or that type of thing, even if you got the large bag and right when you get home from the store, portion it out in little Ziploc baggies, that's a great technique for kids. It's a great technique for families. It's a great technique for even someone who struggles with monitoring portion sizes. Another tip that I'll suggest, and it may be at the end of this presentation too, but I'll say it now, is keep the wrappers out in front of you. So if you're one of those unconscious eaters that it's available, it's candy, I'm going to grab it because it's Halloween time, leave the wrappers on your desk and start to see how many have you had per day or for today, and you're much more likely to stop at 3 or 4 instead of keep going for 5 or 10 per day. Okay, so it just helps with that mindful. A lot of eating patterns is more here, not so much with our stomach. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the intuitive eating piece. And intuitive eating is not something that I would say happens overnight by any means. It's small little changes that we can make and being aware of. So first of all, we have to be aware of our environment, be aware of what kind of eater or dieter we are, be aware of why we're choosing what we're choosing in order to make these changes. So we can't just say, well, I mean, my environment's terrible, my husband eats horribly, so I'm just going to keep eating. We have to be aware of it and then now try to be more conscious about what we're truly doing. So intuitive eating is really more of listening to that connection between our brain and our stomach. It's nothing scientific. It's nothing that there's a rule to follow, but I'm going to give you several steps here that we're going to talk through to try to work through each one of these. To think about how this would impact your life and how you can make those changes. And what I tell with students when I work with this principle of intuitive eating is try to master one and then move on to the next. So it's not a matter of you've got to have this one before this one or that one before that one. Pick one or two, try to really tackle them, and then go back to those ones that are a little bit more challenging for you to do based on your eating type. Okay? So what the intuitive eater does is it makes food choices without guilt or without fear or without dilemma or anxiety. And this is really where we get to the root of a lot of our eating concerns or problems, is we feel guilty when we overeat. We feel guilty if we eat candy. We feel guilty if we eat something that wasn't on our plan. So this kind of diminishes that in a positive way. It honors our hunger cues and signals. So this is something that's hard to determine, are we truly hungry or is this habit? And what I like to tell students too when we try to honor our hunger, and we're going to talk about that one here, is to try to understand, is this hunger? And I'll tell you what that means, what that feels like, or is this truly habit that I just do this every day at 2 o'clock, or I do this when I'm with my friends. You're going to eat whenever you're hungry, not just when you're craving something. Eat whatever you're hungry for, and that's a big one here. I always counsel students and patients to think about, eat what you're hungry for. Don't just eat an apple because that's what is healthy. If you're hungry for some chocolate, let's eat that, but let's find a way to make that into a healthier eating pattern. Okay? Stop eating when we're full. This is a hard one. This is challenging, especially when you're with friends or with family or there's more food available. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay? So there are 10 principles of intuitive eating, and we're going to talk through each one of those. First is to reject the magic diet mentality. So this is really, we talked about diets in the beginning of how restriction and overeating can lead to unhealthy behaviors. But this is what we really want to focus on, is to try to remove these newest diets, these fad diets from our diet. It's hard because we're bombarded with them daily. Our friends and family members may be on a certain one and they've lost a significant amount of weight. It's very tempting to not engage in this, but remember when we do, it always leads us back to that yo-yo back and forth piece. So really trying to reject this mentality. Secondly is honoring your hunger. And this is one that if we keep our body fed with the nutrients that we've talked about, carb, protein, healthy fat, it helps our body to not overeat. Now, how do we know if we're truly hungry? And what I tell students to try to use here, because it's hard to tell a tangible, am I hungry or am I not? A few biological signs that we would be hungry is our stomach is growling, we feel a little lightheaded, kind of have this dizziness type feeling, low blood sugar feeling. It's been more than 3 or 4 hours since we ate. Those are very tangible, concrete things to tell me, yes, it's okay, I should be eating something at this point. When it's just habit, it's usually more of just a craving. It's just a certain time that I'm going to eat. My friends are around. And so I tell them to use the apple test or any type of piece of fruit test here. So if you're in this situation and trying to assess, am I hungry or is this habit? What I would say is if an apple sounds like it would satisfy your hunger, then it's probably more hunger than habit. If you're craving just chocolate or you just want candy, it's probably just more habit that's occurring. So if it's something that's fairly reasonable, like a piece of fruit, you can say vegetables or whatever you want to replace with that, But if it's something of that nature that you feel like, you know what, if I ate that, I'd probably feel a whole lot better, it's truly hunger. It's not necessarily just out of habit that I want to eat something, okay? So that helps a little bit with honoring our hunger and trying to determine if we're truly hungry or habit is occurring. For some people, hunger cues are really hard to distinguish, especially for some people who struggle with disordered eating or those who struggled with just that back and forth dieting, yo-yo type patterns. It's like, well, am I really hungry? I don't know. Should I eat? Should I not? So if it's been more than 3 or 4 hours, make sure we're eating something. If you feel like, okay, this piece of fruit would satisfy my hunger, I'm probably more hungry here and I need to eat something. It doesn't mean you have to eat the fruit. It just means we need to eat something at that time. Okay? Third is making peace with food. And this is a big one, that if, an example here would be, if you would normally not eat donuts, but you're just really, really wanting one, and you know you haven't had it in 4 weeks, and you go through the drive-thru and now you're eating a dozen, that would be not peace with food. Our peace with food would be able to have a donut and feel okay with it and feel empowered by it, but not feel like this guilt and shame is there. An example here too would be a little bit of when we're, an example that I can remember here is you're going out to eat with friends or family and everyone orders dessert, but you're trying to be good and you're trying to be healthy and you're trying to be on your plan, and then you don't eat the dessert with them because you're trying to be healthy. Well, then on the way home, you stop and get not only a small blizzard, but a large because you really wanted that dessert with your friends or family, because we're having a hard time making that peace with food. We couldn't have it in a controlled environment or setting because we were afraid of what other people were going to think about us or act towards us. But when I'm alone, I'm just going to overdo it here. So it's that mental peace with food of knowing I can have one of these and be okay with it. Now, for those of you who are like, yeah, Megan, that's great, but okay, I'm still struggling with that. I would always suggest to have the challenge food, whether it's a dessert or whether it's something salty or something you usually overeat on, have it in a controlled environment. So have it when you're with friends or have it at work or have it in a setting that you're not likely to overindulge on when you're with people that you may not feel as comfortable with. So if cookies are your thing that, you know, at night I'll eat a whole package of them, but during the day I won't eat it with my coworkers, try to have one with your coworkers and engage in that, and it should help your behavior to change that to maybe seeing 1 or 2 cookies as normal, not 3 or 4 here or more. Challenge the food police, and the food police is really right here in our mind. We kind of have this intuition that I have food rules and I can only do this or not do this. So try to get rid of those good and bad foods. Here again, having a donut is not going to make or break us. Having a dozen multiple times a week is probably not the best idea. But that's more here. That's not truly hunger. It's really because we have set up these rules and these good or bad foods in our mind. So challenge yourself to think a little bit outside of that food rule mindset and not labeling those foods good or bad. Okay? It's really just food. And at the end of the day, we need a variety of food. But if it's more here, we've got to think about why is that challenging me to not want to eat that in front of others? Or why is that hard for me not to stop with this amount of chips and I eat the whole bag? Set up our environment a little bit more to help change that. Okay? Fifth is respect your fullness. So eat slowly enough to enjoy your food and allow your body to signal that it's full. So for those of you who are fast eaters, I'm one of those as well because I don't have much time and I'm going. If you struggle with this and you're like, well, I just keep eating because it's available or because I'm a fast eater and my friend or roommate or husband or spouse is just, they're still eating, but I feel like I'm done with mine, but they're still eating, so I get more. What I would say with this is finish your plate and set a timer for 30 minutes. Set that timer and try not to eat anything until that 30 minutes is up and let your body regulate and signal that. This is really great for on the go. This is great too if you're in a family environment that you tend to eat while you're standing up and doing things like that. It really helps to kind of slow down a little bit when you don't really have a chance to slow down. Discover the satisfaction factor. So eat what you really want and you really tend to eat less of that food. So if you really are wanting the dark chocolate in the afternoon or just regular chocolate in the afternoon, eat what you truly want. Don't choose the banana if you hate bananas, but it's there and healthier. Eat what you truly want, and in the long run, you will tend to eat a whole lot less because it's more satisfying for those needs. So try to really develop that satisfaction factor. Okay? Honor our feelings without using food. And this is a big one we could probably talk a whole nother presentation on. But trying to find alternative coping mechanisms with stress, anxiety, emotions, happiness, sadness, and trying to use other ways to deal with that. Whether it's journaling, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's calling a friend. We tend to just use food as that distraction. When I'm bored, I eat. When I'm stressed, I eat. When I'm nervous, I eat. Those are these correlations that we have. And I would challenge you to really think of ways that we can develop a healthier relationship with that food. I always tell students to find something you can do with your hands. So whether it's knitting or crossword puzzle or a game on your phone, something that we can do physically here or physically with our body can truly help us to work on honoring or using our feelings or addressing those feelings without the food. And respect your body too. Accept who you are and your body shape. And this is one thing I see more in the younger population. For those of you here maybe going, okay, yeah, I was kind of there years ago, but now I'm not as much. Or some of you may go, yeah, I'm kind of there. I've always struggled with body image or who I am. And I'll have a lot of people come in and say, well, I'd really like my abs to be a whole lot more defined. I said, well, look at your parents, and you're going to be you don't have to be that, but you're going to be a similar body frame and structure to that. If your mom and dad have bigger hips and legs, you're probably more genetically prone to that. So at some point, too, we have to accept who we are, what our body frame and structure is going to look like, and not try to change what's there. If we may never have abs that our roommate or friend has, and that's okay, but we have to really accept that and not try to change it through disordered thoughts or disordered patterns. Okay? 9, exercise. This is part of the Wellness Works program as well, and we have to move our body to feel that difference and feel better. So try to shift the focus away from burning calories. And I love the Fitbits for tracking activity, tracking steps, tracking our food, but sometimes we can even go too far with those as well. And we think about, well, I walked 10,000 steps today, I could do this. Or we set those parameters on ourselves too. And I would always challenge you to think of exercise as, this is what I'm doing that feels good for my body and for my long-term health, not necessarily to lose weight, to burn calories, and have these strict guidelines around that. So try to use it more as long-term and longevity of health. And then lastly, we want to honor our health. So we've talked a little bit about this before, but I tell people all the time too, when we step on a scale, it doesn't weigh how much muscle we are, how much fat we are, how old we are. It doesn't tell us anything. And so we've got to look at our health in the bigger picture. I even have patients that I work with who are very thin, look very healthy, look very normal, but their cholesterol is through the roof. Their triglycerides are not well. They're not eating healthy. And then I have some who are on the overweight scale or close to the obese BMI and are perfectly healthy. Everything looks good. So the scale is not the end-all be-all here. We have to look at what makes us feel well mentally, physically, emotionally, and food being one of those, but we have to connect the two together. Our mental thought and aspects with our physical pieces here. Okay, so how do we apply that? I've talked a few of about these already, but I'm going to go over them. So buying in bulk, if we do buy those things in larger packages and we struggle with that start and finish or eating the whole package, portion those out. Not when you're stressed, not when you're anxious, not when you're bored. Portion them out right when you get home from the store. Portion them out when you're kind of in that groove of doing different things. So that helps a lot. If you think you might still be hungry, I've talked about this, setting a timer for 30 minutes to decide truly, is my stomach growling? Has it been more than 4 hours? Do I feel a little bit of that lightheadedness? I usually use hard candies too for some of my patients who struggle with overeating. So they'll eat and they're like, I don't really know if I'm hungry or if I'm full or I'm kind of bored. Use hard candies, so Jolly Ranchers, Lifesavers, those types of things, or even gum helps tremendously to kind of just give us a little bit of time to see, am I truly hungry, or was that just habit or my environment that caused that? Try to eat meals at the table, not while distracted, not while standing. If you do end up doing that, try to here again set that timer for the 30 minutes. Use a smaller spoon, force yourself to slow down, put that utensil down between bites. Really make a conscious effort of being present with the food. And this leads into a little bit of holiday eating too. Everyone will ask me, okay, well, how do you get around the holidays with so much food and eating all that? I say, well, try to be more present with who you're with. Have a conversation with family members or friends or what you're doing. Be more present in the situation, not necessarily thinking so much about the food there. Give gratitude. Remember, the food is really there to fuel you. We're really there to talk about who we're with, what we're doing, that environmental piece. And try to resign from the clean plate club or just serve yourself less. Way easier said than done, but a trick that I'll use at restaurants a lot of times, especially for those that give you way more than you really truly need, is if you have someone you're eating with that doesn't want to split a plate with you or doesn't want the same thing, ask for a to-go box right away when you get your food. So, okay, I ordered my food, they brought it out, say, can I please have a to-go box? Not wait till the end like we normally do, and put half of it in right away. So now our plate looks half, we have a start and finish, and we're a whole lot less likely to go back to the to-go box and eat the rest of it in that setting as well. And we will feel a whole lot more full doing that. So it's just a great tip to use when you're out to eat or in a place that you feel like you're likely to overeat on. Especially like Mexican restaurants, you eat the whole basket of chips and your food comes. Like, well, I ordered this food, I need to finish it, and we leave feeling miserable. And then that just sets us up for not honoring how much we were truly hungry. So if you're craving something sweet here, great list of sweet treats that are a little bit healthier. But here again, I would always say, have what you like. I probably eat at least a serving of dark chocolate every day because I like it. And I just need something a little sweet. But if I have it every day, I tend to less overindulge on it when I do not have it available or when it's available in a uncontrolled environment. So portion out of serving, completely appropriate to be doing here. Salty, same thing. So we can portion out a serving of these, or here, like I said, having the individual bags of your favorite chips that you really enjoy or love, perfectly fine to choose. Just make sure they're in a controlled portion to help with our mindset here. Okay. Here again, being hungry is like being in love. If you don't know, you're probably not. And this is one thing too that we just tend to go through the motions with our eating, with our life, with our patterns. But we have to honor that hunger and we have to really assess where we are on that spectrum. Okay? So physical hunger versus emotional hunger, I talked a little bit about this too, but here's just kind of a comparison chart for you. So physical hunger usually comes on gradually, can be a little bit postponed. Emotional is kind of feels urgent. So all of a sudden I'm craving that chocolate, or I want that cookie sitting there, or that bag of chips from the vending machine. Physical can be satisfied with any type of food. Emotional, you have those specific cravings. There's kind of that apple test that I mentioned. Really, if an apple sounds good, then I'm going to eat it and be good with that. Then it's probably more hunger. Have what you would love to have there, but the emotional is usually more specific. Once you're full, you usually can stop eating with physical. That emotional is eating until uncomfortably full, so eating the whole container of ice cream or having more after that. It felt okay in the moment, but in 30 minutes or so, I just don't feel very good there. Okay? And it causes satisfaction. Usually doesn't cause guilt because we're truly hungry. We usually have a little bit more guilt with that emotional eating, and that's where we find ourselves feeling, gosh, should I have done that? Was that appropriate? And we kind of go back and forth with ourselves there. Okay? This is a scale that I use a lot of times too with patients. If you're truly struggling or you feel like, okay, this is all great information, but I really still don't know if I'm hungry or not. This is going to be in your slide packet too, and I tell my patients to put yourself on this scale before a meal and after a meal. And ideally, we want to be kind of at that level 3 before we eat, and usually about the 5 or 6 after we eat. And try to assess yourself where you are before and after. If you find that you're at the extreme, so here we're completely starving, dizzy, we haven't eaten all day, we tend to end up at a 10 when we're done with that. And vice versa. If we start eating when we're kind of comfortably full at a 6, we're going to put ourselves at the end of that scale usually on a 10 because we weren't hungry to begin with. So these are great techniques that you can use just in your own personal life to say, where am I at this point? If there's a certain meal you struggle with or snack that you struggle with overeating or not truly understanding if you're hungry or not. Okay? So a few tips here before we open it up for questions. So when we're eating mindfully, think 20% more or less. And I really try to emphasize an 80-20 rule. Eat well 80% of the time, 20% allow for the sweets, the indulgences, the chips or what have you here. So eat until just 80% full as well. So we want to try to just eat until we're about that 6 or 7, not pushing it another 20%. Dish out a little bit less than what you may think. This is great going into the holiday season as well, because you're probably going to be more satisfied when you do that than giving yourself that full amount. And then 20% more of your fruits, vegetables, thinking back to that plate, half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables here. Okay? See your food. See how much food you have before you eat. This is another thing if you struggle with hunger and cues. Take a picture before you eat and after you eat and try to see those differences and how much you're eating and what might be appropriate there. Does your plate look like it has some fruit and vegetable, or is it all mainly carbohydrates or all protein? Don't eat from the box or container. Portion it out. This is another huge one that we can do on a daily basis. Instead of sitting down with a pint of ice cream, scoop it out and put it in a bowl. Instead of sitting down with the bag, put it in a little bowl or put it in a little bag. Tremendously helps with portion control. And see how much food you've eaten. And I talked about this a little bit. Leave the remainder wrappers, leave the remainder rib bone, leave the remainder chicken wing bone to truly see that, because it really helps our mind correlate with our stomach and not just I'm hungry or I'm not or there's more food coming, because that brings back that unconscious dieter from the beginning. It takes about 20 minutes for our body and brain to signal that we're full. That's why I suggest waiting at least 30 minutes before we would eat a second helping or a dessert or something like that to help. Okay? And another tip here is sensory numbing. So our senses respond most intensely to the first bite of anything, and we can probably see how that happens. The second bite a little bit less. And so having variety really allows the senses to continue to be surprised. So it never reaches that threshold of, okay, I'm good, I'm done. So when we mix these different things, we see that we have more of a response of what we're eating and how much we're eating with that. Okay? So how can we use all this? I would say if we're having dessert or having this sensory overload at times, have 2 bites of the dessert, share a dessert with friends, and kind of be done. Or have a little bit of each item to get the taste of it, not a helping of each item. I think Thanksgiving meals here. So you'll experience the most sensation from the first 2 bites of food. So if you order a cake, split it with someone, have your 2 bites, and kind of be done. Or have your 2 bites of the salty snack, or have your 2 bites of whatever that may be that's a challenge for you. Okay? All right, we have about 5 minutes or so, so I want to open it up for any questions about just eating patterns, how to connect that brain and stomach together, and anything that maybe you're doing or have specific questions about. Anyone? Was there any tip in here that you feel like maybe you are using already, or something, if you're not already using it, is there anything that you feel like you can tangibly use and you can implement in your own practice? Yes?
And for me, smaller bowls, that's something I love ice cream, and I think maybe finding a smaller bowl is a good portion size instead of just grabbing the pint of ice cream.
Absolutely. Yeah, so she kind of mentioned using a smaller bowl, portioning it out in that smaller bowl really helps. And we'd be amazed at how long the pint can last now instead of all in one sitting. But it's so easy to do, and we all do it. I'm just as guilty of it. But when we can truly become more mindful about it, it makes a world of difference. And we're just as satisfied, and that's the great thing about it. We still have the foods we love. We're not cutting anything out. So great point there. Anything else? Yes?
what was the purpose of this? Okay, so they used the smaller bowls for ice cream, they used a smaller scoop. What was the purpose of the smaller spoon? Was it just proportionate to the rest of it?
Yeah, that, and if you think about when we use a little bit of a smaller utensil, our bites are a little bit smaller. It takes us longer to eat, and it takes us at least 20-30 minutes to fill full. And so when it takes us longer to eat, now I'm not encouraging you to go to the store and buy like tiny little kid spoons to use, but if we look at some of our utensils, like I know ours at home, we have a smaller fork and a larger fork. We use the smaller fork, it takes us a little bit longer because we can't get as much on there. And that really helps with portion control, but also being more aware of the fullness cues. Yes.
Well, as far as ice cream, I like Bluebell homemade vanilla. There's certain ones I go for the flavor. I have the regular size spoon, but I let it warm up a little bit, and I just like skim little taste, and I savor it. I'm not watching TV. I'm like focusing on all the different nuances of the flavoring.
Absolutely. Yes, and that's a great point too that wasn't mentioned. It's savoring that food. It's kind of like those 2 bites, yes, or just inhaling it. And usually when we just inhale it is one where we haven't had it in so long, or we're starving physically. And with those savoring bites, I think about too, like even dark chocolate. And this is an activity that some professors will even do with classes, is if you ever take a piece of dark chocolate, hold it in your hand, think about it. It kind of makes these steps progress. So you hold it in your hand and you think about it. And you think about what it's going to taste like or what it would feel like. And then you unwrap it. And then you leave the wrapper out and then you put it in your mouth. And there's no distraction, there's no TV, no phone, no computer. We put it in our mouth and we taste it. And when we truly taste it, we're able to have 1 or 2. We don't just bite through it and have 1 and we're done and then we're eating another. And we just kind of go with that mindless approach.
Well,
it's the same with the
dark
ice
chocolate. I'm a nibbler.
Yes.
I get enough for the flavor, and I relish the
And
flavor.
it's truly those first 2 bites that we're finding that your sensory cues are the highest. And so if we can do that and have 2 bites or have a piece and be done and move on to something else, it truly helps us to become a more mindful eater. And that's the goal of all of this, is to be more intuitive, be more mindful, and have the foods we still love. So we can have Bluebell and not have to buy Halo Top ice cream because it's way lower calorie. We're going to feel a whole lot more satisfied with that Bluebell ice cream or with that piece of chocolate that we truly wanted than trying to buy the sugar-free variety or the low-calorie variety and eating more.
Well, another thing is if you're craving chocolate, nothing else is going to satisfy it.
Right.
You're going to eat the apple, you're going to eat the banana, you're going to go through all this other food, and you're still going to wind up getting the chocolate
Right.
because you're
So
craving
if we're truly hungry, eat what sounds good. But if it's that habit that I just eat this chocolate because it's available, take a step back and think, am I hungry? Is this truly something I want? I mean, am I just eating the Milky Way because it's there, or do I really like it? And that's a lot of this too, is we tend to just eat it because it's available, not because we truly like it. And at Thanksgiving or any holiday, I always tell patients, go to the dessert table and choose what you truly love. Don't put everything on your plate because it's there. If you love pumpkin pie, eat a full piece of pumpkin pie, but don't feel like you have to try everything or have something of everything because it's free or available or that unconsciousness there.
I think when we have that first bite, that sensory, the reason we overeat is because we're trying to recreate that every single time. And this doesn't work. So you have to tell your brain, it's not going to work. But
Absolutely, and you're right. So that sensory, the 2 bites, if we have it and stop, we're a lot more satisfied than if we keep going, because then we feel guilty, and then we feel like we ate too much, and then we have this, oh gosh, I really shouldn't have had more than 1 bite of that. But once the sensory taste buds are exposed to those first 2 bites, that's it. So it's there, it's great, it's wonderful, and then we keep eating, and now this hurts more than this did. So we have to just take a step back in a lot of these situations. But any time before we eat, we've got to make sure that we're not overly hungry. Because anytime we're overly hungry, think back to those first few slides of deprivation diets and being too hungry, we're going to choose whatever it is. So we could talk about this all day long, But if we go into a situation starving, it doesn't matter if we had the great intention of eating 2 bites. We're going to eat the whole thing because we're truly hungry. So we first have to make sure that we're not starving ourselves or going into a situation so hungry that it's uncomfortable. But then when we are in that situation, we've got to do things like the smaller plates, like the 1 or 2 bites, like the little servings of things, which really helps.
Or you chew like 30 times to get the fork down.
Yeah,
That's really
chewing
helping.
longer, yes. So making sure we truly chew the food, not just swallowing it whole and moving on to the next thing. Because the 30-minute time slot is key to feeling that fullness, especially for those people who struggle with, am I full? I don't know. I've overeaten my whole life. It really helps to say, okay, 30 minutes, wait, and be done. Okay. All right, I'm happy to answer. Yes?
Okay, well, you're talking about when you eat, you hit certain times on that scale that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what about when you have family members with you? Because they may not be hitting it at the same time. What are you doing about that?
On the hunger scale?
If you okay, we eat it. I mean, you used to. You ate at noon, Dad came home, and dinner was waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody ate at the same time. Was there, but wouldn't there have levels have been different?
Yeah, so when you're with different people, how do you do that hunger? And it's really more of an individual hunger scale, so put yourself on that path where you are. But it's hard when you're with other people who, this is what time we're going to go eat together, and you may not truly be that physically hungry as much as they are, or you may be on a different number. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and with family, I mean, you and your husband and kids. I mean,
Yeah.
What do you, I mean?
Yeah, and so it's hard
Is there
because
disconnect?
it's almost like, okay, well, if I'm already at a 5, if I'm pretty full going into dinner, then I still don't want to push myself to a 10. Maybe my portion is a lot smaller at dinner today than it usually is. So it's still engaging in that conversation socially. It's the same as if you were invited to a happy hour networking event and you're like, I just ate lunch an hour ago, I'm really kind of full. But we still go and engage socially, but our hunger, our fullness may not go all the way there. It may just go 1 or 2 points because we're eating a little bit smaller. But the next day we may eat a full meal because we're a lot more hungry at that time. So it's kind of like we don't want to just to eat though when someone else eats. If it's a mealtime, if it's a social gathering, I would always challenge you to have something with that, whether it's just using that smaller plate, like if you used an appetizer or dessert plate for your meal instead of the larger meal when you were whatever location you were at. But if you're truly hungry too, you want to make sure that you have a full meal and honor that. But try not to eat just whenever someone else eats. I find myself here a lot, like my little son will eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but then he has 2 snacks, morning and afternoon at daycare. Well, when he comes home on the weekend, he does the same thing, and it's like, well, I'm not hungry at 10 o'clock, but I know he needs something, but it's hard for me sometimes not to want to eat as well. And it's not that I'm hungry, it's just that he's eating. And so we have to kind of take a step back and go, where am I on this scale? If I'm already at a 5 or 6, I really don't need to be eating here. He may be different because of his needs and growth area, but I'm not. And it's very difficult to do, but it's something we just really have to be more aware of. Okay? All good questions. So I'm happy to stay afterwards as well if you have those. I'll send the slides so everyone will have those at the end too. So,
Lovely.
okay?
Thank you, Megan.
welcome.
So I hope you all have enjoyed this Eat Well, Be Well series this fall. Please share any comments, suggestions that y'all might have from the series. We will be hoping to gather y'all's insight as well, sent out to everyone. But Megan's been great. I hope y'all think so too. So please feel free to just share your comments or love for this or maybe concerns. But I hope y'all have a great rest of the day. Thank y'all for coming and viewing live on CTV.